It's time to get my motherfucking learn on. It is the 4th of July, 2025 right now as I'm recording this. Independence Day. It is storming outside. It's raining. It ruined our evening. We had to cut all the fun and fireworks short. So I figure why not watch the Roaring Twenties? Let's look into a little bit of American history and see what the 1920s were all about. Let's go.
Today in the Daily Dose.
From
The
Daily
Roaring
Dose
20s.
Documentary.
After
Subscribe.
the armistice of November
Oh,
11th,
yeah.
1918, that brought a
1918.
close
Yeah.
to the war to end all wars. A
The
year
war to
later,
end all wars.
more
World
than
War
2 million
One.
U.S. soldiers had returned victorious to their native soil.
Wait a minute, how many?
2 million U.S. soldiers
2
had
million?
returned
Holy
victorious to their
fuck.
native soil. Duly honored
a
by a parade through
fucking
New York City,
shitload
which had
of
now become
soldiers.
the
No wonder we
beating
won.
heart of world finance and banking.
Dude, could you imagine 2 million fucking soldiers going to war today? I mean, how many U.S. soldiers? I gotta look this up. I know I'm supposed to be doing the video. I'm supposed to be playing it through. And see, it's 4th of July on Google. How? Hold on. I'm thinking. What am I looking at? How many U.S. soldiers went to Iraq in 2003? How many? 160,000 U.S. troops entered Iraq during the initial invasion phase of the 2003 Iraq War. The reason I'm going with that one was because it's probably the most recent American invasion that I can think of, at least. I mean, I know there was Afghanistan, but I'm sure Iraq was I'm sure it was bigger. I mean, I don't think 2003 was the same as in early 2000s. How about that? Early 2000s. I know I spelled Afghanistan wrong, but that's okay because it's correcting it for me. Approximately 8,000 U.S. troops in the country. How fucking crazy is that shit? You know, Afghanistan was supposed to be behind the whole 9/11 thing, which they weren't. It was Saudi Arabia because most of the hijackers were Saudi. They weren't Afghanis. And Osama bin Laden, I don't think he was from Afghanistan anyway. I'm pretty sure he wasn't. But yeah, Iraq had really nothing at all to do with the World Trade Centers. But the big propaganda campaign was that Iraq was entangled in it in some way or another with the WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. But yeah, look at that. Between 8 and 12,000 U.S. troops went to Afghanistan. 160 went to Iraq. Absolutely fucking crazy. But anyway, why am I bringing this up? Because the 2 million troops that returned home from World War I compared to 160,000 U.S. troops, I'm just saying, imagine any kind of war in the 21st century where 2 million soldiers would be sent off to war. That's got to be more than our entire military. Americans enlisted in, well, I don't have to put that. In the military. How many Americans are in the military right now? I'm going to ask Brave. I don't know. Sometimes Brave, they can be a little... Okay, yeah, here we go. U.S. military's total strength right now is 2.86 million troops, including 1.31 million active duty troops. And 765,495 are in the National Guard and reserves. So, yeah, man. So that actually does include the National Guard, which I would include that. Sure. I mean, they're enlisted one way or another, whether if they're enlisted with the state or with, the federal government or whatever. But yeah, 2 million, 2.86 million to be exact. So yeah, 2 million coming home from World War I. I mean, it's still a smaller number than what we have in the entirety of our military, including the National Guard. But I mean, even still, just imagine us getting involved, getting dragged into a war in the 21st century where we would have to send that many troops. That would be fucking
Thanks in large
mind-boggling.
part to America's ability to lend money.
Wait, just one more thing. I'm sorry. Here, let me go back a little bit because I know I'm interrupting again. But how many troops were drafted? How many Americans were drafted in World War II or World War I? In World War I, the Great War. How many Americans were drafted in World War I? 2.8 million were drafted into the U.S. military during World War I. Under the Selective Service Act, that is insane. Wait a minute. Okay, hold on. This figure is consistent with other sources that mention the Act's role in expanding the military through conscription and the registration of around 24 million men. So them saying in the Roaring Twenties video that 2 million men returned home, I mean, I really, I mean, I actually know for a fact that 22 million men did not die in World War II. So I don't know what the exact context is with the 2 million men returning home. Maybe that was just from France or some other area during World War I, maybe. But I mean, according to this, through conscription or the total number of men who were registered during the World War I era numbered up to 24 million. Wow, that is crazy. That is so many people.
Finance and banking, thanks in large part to America's ability to lend money and manufacture weapons for her beleaguered war allies in Europe.
Yep, that was helpful,
The
wasn't
nation was about to enter a period of extreme prosperity,
Same with WW2.
liberalization, and social unrest. Yet as the new decade dawned, at noon on September 16th, 1920, a horse-drawn wagon exploded in front of the J.P. Morgan Bank on Wall Street, killing 38, while leaving
What?
another 143 seriously
What
wounded.
the fuck?
The two events,
Act of
from
terrorism
the
in
triumphant
1920,
return
dude.
of doughboys to the
Doughboys.
communist Red Scare fears
Well,
suspected behind the
motherfuckers.
Wall Street bombing, both stood
Shit.
as fitting, polarized bookends of the Roaring Twenties to come.
Better string them
But
motherfuckers
before
up.
prosperity came a brief
They
hangover
deserve to
from the
pay.
First World War, when the sudden
World War.
loss of wartime production put the
Wartime
brakes
production.
on the American economy, leaving
Right.
some 1 million returning soldiers unemployed as they relied heavily on breadlines for their daily
Ooh,
sustenance.
yeah, that's a problem.
Many Americans found themselves in a world of financial hurt.
I mean, of course, when you compare American life back then to American life today, they didn't have nearly as many bills to pay back then as we got to pay today. You know, with our cell phones and our cable and our internet, crazy high car payments and all that. You know, we got a lot more going on these days. All these subscriptions, subscribing to Netflix, and you know, you got to update your Adobe subscription and Netflix and all that other nonsense, Amazon Prime, and it goes on and on.
Incoming President Warren G. Harding to promise that
President
he would
Hard.
put things right for America and return the country to normalcy. Historians would later frame Harding as one of the worst presidents in the nation's history.
Oh, snap. Yeah,
Yet
I actually
during his
think I
term
knew
in
that.
office, he benefited greatly from an age of rapid innovation and technological advancement.
Now, that definitely happened
Leading
at
the
the turn of
charge
the 20th
was men
century.
like Henry Ford,
Big time.
whose first mass-produced Model T drove off his Piquette Avenue
Model
assembly
T.
plant in Detroit in 1908,
The assembly line.
revolutionizing interchangeable parts production methods,
Detroit.
while delivering the first affordable automobile to road-hungry middle-class Americans.
Yep, that was Henry Ford's vision. He wanted every worker in his factory to be able to afford a Ford Model T. And that was part of his big push to roll out the assembly line process. And I don't know if he was solely credited with the whole 5-day work week and the 2-day weekend, but apparently it was during Henry Ford's era. I think that's actually credited to him, the 5-day work week, you know, working like, I don't know, about 40 hours a week, but the Monday through Friday and then having Saturday and Sunday off. Apparently that started with Henry Ford.
Colloquially known as the Tin Lizzie, when the Model T first hit the streets, American roads, or what at the time passed for roads, saw fewer than 200,000 cars across the entirety of the United States.
Dude, could you imagine?
Limited exclusively to wealthy Americans who could afford such a high-priced luxury.
I mean, talk about standing out like a sore thumb. So back then, if you were driving an automobile, you were rich. In other words, you're easy prey for criminals. Like, well, they're driving in a vehicle, so they got money. Let's hold them up.
While Henry Ford's first Model Ts off his assembly line were initially rather expensive, $825, or roughly $27,000 in today's currency. By 1925, the
Pre-COVID,
cost
that's
per
on par.
automobile had plummeted to $260 each.
What?
Along with the introduction of the first moving assembly line between 1908 and 1927, Henry Ford produced more than 15 million Model T Fords,
Holy fuck!
making the Model T
15
the longest
million?
production run of any car in history
Mother
until the
fuck,
Volkswagen
man, that's
Beetle hit the
awesome.
streets in 1949,
Hell
eventually
yeah, son.
selling 21.5 million units.
21.5 million. Fuck,
His
man.
innovations turned Detroit
That is a
into
shitload.
boomtown, while making
Look at all those
Ford
radiators.
one of
I
America's
think those are radiators.
earliest billionaires.
I don't know. What the fuck do I know?
As the economy began
Making
to
the wooden
boom in
wheel,
the
the
early
wagon wheel for the
1920s,
vehicles.
New roads emerged to
Model
accommodate
T.
the millions of new cars plying city and suburban streets swelled by new
Look at all them
housing and business
1920s hats.
construction. Although one business,
Dude, that
the
would have been the shit
alcohol
to be in the
industry,
20s. I don't know
failed
about
to
living
join
through
the
it, but
boom due to the start of prohibition in
dude, if I had a fucking time machine and if I could go back to any decade in the 20th century, I would have to go with Roaring Twenties, man. Roaring Twenties would be the shiz night with all the partying, with all the speakeasies. Prohibition was around though, so alcohol would have been a pain in the ass to get your hands on. Plus, you got to have the secret knock, the secret handshakes, and all that bullshit to try to get into those speakeasies. But dude, the 1920s, man, it looked off the chain back then, and the style, man, the way people dressed, and just the way the people just the way that the decor looked, the furniture, interior design, even just the buildings themselves. I mean, just a fucking gorgeous time. I mean, in my opinion, at least.
America.
Which decade
By
would
way
you
of
choose?
backstory,
Put it in the
when the
description.
Mayflower made landfall at Plymouth
I read
Rock,
all my
her
comments,
hold
at least
carried a sizable
for the
cargo
first
of
couple of
beer,
weeks after I posted.
setting off a culture in America that gravitated around the consumption of alcohol. George Washington supplied his beleaguered troops at Valley Forge with a half cup of daily rum,
Yeah,
while young
hell
Abraham
yeah.
Lincoln made a tidy living selling barrels of whiskey from his grocery store in New Salem, Illinois.
No shit. I didn't know that. Abraham Lincoln sold alcohol for a living? Well, he had a grocery store. I didn't fucking know that either. Did you know Abraham Lincoln ran a grocery store and that's how he made a living? I didn't know that shit. I just thought he was a fucking lawyer. He was a lawyer for a while and then somehow he ended up being president. That should be there should be something else that I should check out because, I mean, I should know more about Abraham Lincoln than I actually know. That probably
But
goes
as
for most of
distillers
us.
moved from 2%
Don't
beer
lie to yourself. Don't be
high-octane
lying.
whiskeys and rum.
We got to get our
By
Abe
the
Lincoln on, man.
1830s, the average American over 15 years of age drank the equivalent of 88 bottles of whiskey each and every year.
What the
More
fuck?
than 3 times the consumption of today's legal age adults.
Yo! And it was prohibited.
Husbands came home drunk and penniless from a night on the town, leaving families destitute and frequently abused.
All right, well,
In response, temperance
probably why they
leagues such as
prohibited
the
it.
Anti-Saloon League cropped up in cities across America, leading to
those
the 18th Amendment to
motherfuckers.
the U.S. Constitution. Known as the Volstead Act, the
The
law came
Volstead.
into effect on January
Fuck.
17th,
Bastards.
1920,
Look
prohibiting
at all that
the
alcohol.
sale, manufacture, or transportation of alcoholic beverages. Enforcement initially fell upon the Internal Revenue Service until a rise in gang-related
There's Al
bootleggers
Capone,
such
fucking
as Al
gangsta.
Capone, combined with illegal drinking establishments known as speakeasies,
The goat.
which in turn moved enforcement to
goat.
the Justice Department and the Bureau
Look
of
at that shit.
Prohibition. While Prohibition witnessed the true birth of organized crime in America,
Oh, yeah.
it also pointed to a nation's steadfast resistance
Isn't that when they invented was it the superchargers or the turbochargers? I think it was the supercharger, wasn't it? I think like gangsters or like mechanics that gangsters hired or some shit that they actually, they added auxiliary parts to the vehicles to make them outrun the cops. And I think that's when like the innovation of the supercharger or some shit came out. I don't know. I think that was somewhat accurate at least.
to being told how to behave by others. While high-priced illegal alcohol could be afforded by middle and upper-class Americans,
Oh, you fucked, son.
the nation's working
Going
class
to
was forced
jail.
to abstain from alcohol or resort to making their own moonshine whiskeys or bathtub gins.
Ugh,
And as the Roaring
yikes.
Twenties reached its zenith years, even moderates within the temperance movement began to understand that the high costs of Prohibition's enforcement grew increasingly untenable.
Right.
As
Yeah.
the demand for black market booze intensified,
You're not going to stop America
competition
from
amongst
drinking.
bootleggers
Mm.
witnessed the deaths of
Fucking
some
idiots had the
600
dumbest ass
monsters
idea
in
ever.
Chicago alone. At the same time, after women won the right to vote in 1920,
Yeah.
speakeasies combined with an overt desire by young women to break with the conservative female mores of the Victorian era, inspiring a new, uninhibited lifestyle that shocked the more conservative
strong and
elements
independent.
of American society, leading author Dorothy Parker to write that the flapper was not what Grandma used to be.
The
Coined from the hit movie by
floozy.
the same name,
The lady
flappers
of the
defined
evening.
the spirit of the 1920s, who had at first tasted independence during the war years,
Ooh, taste
inspiring
good.
a strong desire to part
Yeah,
ways with
I could drive my
Victorian
own car now.
definitions of a woman's role through
No credit
marriage
cards
and
yet.
motherhood.
Not till the 70s.
They were women who embraced the spirit of pleasure, independence, exploration, and freedom.
Don't forget strong. Strong and
Flappers
independent.
bobbed their hair, listened to jazz, and
Oh, yeah.
flaunted
Don't
their
need no
disdain
man.
for what was then considered acceptable behavior. They were also seen by conservatives as openly brash for wearing excessive makeup and dresses of near nakedness, at the same time adopting typical
They
male
ain't seen nothing
behaviors
yet.
such as smoking and drinking alcohol, driving automobiles, treating sex in a casual manner, and otherwise flouting social and sexual norms. The rise of the automobile was an important factor in flapper culture, as cars
Flapper
allowed
culture.
women to come and go as they pleased, traveling
Come and go.
freely to
Oh, yeah,
speakeasies and
alright.
other entertainment venues, while using the large vehicles of the day for their most popular
Ford
activity,
Model T.
petting parties, the
Petting
original
parties.
Tinder
Uh-oh.
or Hinge of the Roaring Twenties.
Oh, that's naughty.
According to one study from the late 1920s, 92% of college students participated in petting parties, which went
Why
by
does that
other
not
names
surprise me?
such as snuggle parties, snuggle pupping,
This sounds oddly familiar to our culture over the last 10, 15 years now, doesn't
and
it?
necking, adding more relevance to the question, Great Grandma, what did you do when you were young? With the American economy now firmly
Dude, that's actually really ominous now that I think about that. As loose as everybody seems to have gotten in recent years. I mean, like, things have been pretty casual for the last 20, 30 years, but it's gotten insanely bad over the last 10, 15 years. So if you want to compare that to the 1920s, I mean, look at the decade following. That wasn't good. That wasn't good at all. I mean, they didn't have like COVID bullshit in the 1920s. I mean, they had the Spanish flu in the teens, but I don't know, man. I don't know, man. Like just like in the Roaring Twenties, debt was getting out of control. The lending culture was getting absolutely insane during the 20s, and that, from what I understand, that's what helped contribute to the fall of our economy and into the 1930s. Was this like insane debt culture that we found ourselves in, and look where the fuck we're at now. Look at all this debt that everybody's got right now. Record high credit card debt. I mean, people owe shitloads of money in mortgages and student debt and car debt. I mean, it's shit. I just read this fucking number the other day. It was, I believe, 20% of anybody and everybody out there that has a car payment, they're paying over $1,000 a month. Crazy. That is ominous.
in overdrive.
That is
On
not
August
good.
2nd, 1923, President Harding died suddenly from a heart attack, while his successor Calvin Coolidge, known as Silent Cal, continued the decade of Republican dominance
Silent
in American
Cal.
politics, maintaining Harding's pro-business, laissez-faire economic policies, when he said that one of the greatest favors that can be bestowed upon the American people is economy and government, since the chief business of the American people
Well, not
is
too much
business.
government.
African Americans, on the other hand, were largely excluded from the same institutional prosperity as whites. And while racism and segregation were rampant throughout the
Parallel
United
economy.
States, such exclusionary tactics were at their worst in the Jim Crow South.
Damn
Named
Democrats.
after a black minstrel show character,
That was
Jim
Democrats.
Crow laws were a collection of mostly southern
your
state
history.
and local statutes that legalized racial
Some
segregation,
things never change.
which was implemented shortly after the end of the Civil War and lasted until the civil rights protests and federal legislation of the 1960s. The laws were intended to marginalize African
Oh,
Americans.
come on. We got to
by
stay in the
suppressing
20s.
their right to
You're getting a
vote,
little ahead of yourself.
limiting their access to good-paying jobs, and excluding their access to higher education.
Yeah,
Those who
not good.
attempted to shirk the laws
Good thing we
often
fixed
faced
that.
arrest, fines, jail time, violence, and even death. Even in places where black prosperity had taken root in America,
Now, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I understand, the Republicans, they wrote the legislation for the Civil Rights Act. And what was it? When JFK was in, that's when Democrats saw an opportunity to get a lot of favor on their side. So they essentially, I don't think hijack is the right word, but they essentially adopted it themselves and they took all the credit for it. So, it was largely Democrats that paved the way to the Jim Crow South. It was largely, overwhelmingly, the Democrats that were in the South during the Civil War, fighting against the Union. They were the Confederacy. in the Union, largely Republicans, which the Republican Party didn't really start until Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he was the first Republican, and then it kind of took off from there. So, I mean, some things don't really seem to change a whole lot over long periods of time. I mean, which side are the ones that are constantly talking about racism and racist and putting everything through the lens of race these days? I mean, it's not really the Republicans, in my
such
opinion.
as Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood,
Nope.
Florida. A marked rise in social tension regarding race and undesirable immigrants witnessed the second rise of the Ku Klux Klan, which led to
That's
racist
Democrats.
massacres
They
in
started the
Tulsa
Ku Klux
in
Klan.
1921, followed by
Hey, man, don't take my word for it. Go look it up yourself. Look up the Ku Klux Klan. You can check Wikipedia, which Wikipedia is a very liberal, left-leaning website, and go read the history on the Ku Klux Klan. They were started by the Democrats.
Rosewood in 1923. Racial tensions and the Jim Crow laws of the segregated South prompted many African Americans to flee for northern cities.
Yeah, also during the 1920s, take this map from the 1920s and look at the political map of which states were leaning more Republican or leaning more Democrat. Which ones were the blue states and which ones were the red states? It might surprise you to see that these states that are highlighted here were all blue states because the Democrats controlled the South back then,
During what became known as the Great Migration,
otherwise known as the Jim Crow
traveling
era.
by trains, boats, buses, and cars, even the occasional horse-drawn cart. By the mid-1920s, black populations in major northern and midwestern cities rose precipitously, including a 66% rise in New York City.
Which was really interesting when you look at the Great Migration. If I believe that was what they called it. The Great Migration it parallels the timeline of the Democrats moving into large cities. I mean, because today, if you look at a map, county by county across the United States, you'll see that the overwhelming majority of the South is now red, and actually the overwhelming majority of the entire country is red, really. But when you look at cities, when you look at urbanized areas, they're overwhelmingly blue, Democrat voters. And it seems to track almost exactly along the same era as when the Great Migration was happening with African Americans fleeing the South, trying to get away from the South, and then they settled in larger cities, which just coincidentally it happened to be roughly around the same time that Democrats were pretty much overwhelmingly voting in the large cities, which they may have been the whole time. I guess that's very possible. I'm sure New York has probably been pretty Democrat for the majority of its existence, and probably the same with the other major cities. But I mean, it wasn't because of the African American population that led to the urban centers being overwhelmingly Democrat, because they only represent like 13 or 15% of the U.S. population. But it's just kind of interesting how history plays out.
148% in Chicago, 500 in Philadelphia, and a whopping 611% in Detroit. Many found work from factories to foundries, and while conditions were frequently backbreaking and dangerous, opportunities were plentiful and financially rewarding. The Great Migration also led to the
That's
Harlem
what I thought it was
Renaissance,
called.
when
Fucking Great
300,000 new black residents became home to many black notables, including poets Claude McKay, Jean Toomer, and Conte Cullen, writers Jesse Redmond Fawcett and Langston Hughes, actor Paul Robeson, sociologist Charles Spurgeon Johnson, and civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson. Yet it was the music of the Harlem Renaissance
Jazz music
that gave the period its indelible mark on American music, including jazz greats such as Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Fats Waller,
I have a
Josephine
Duke
Baker,
Ellington vinyl.
and Cab Calloway.
True
By
story.
the middle of the decade,
Wes
a flood
Montgomery,
of new
I got some of his
inventions
vinyls too.
revolutionized everyday life in America, including such modern conveniences as vacuum cleaners, electric refrigerators, ovens, and washing machines, which in turn gave Americans more leisure time from their otherwise work-driven lives.
Absolutely.
The rising number of radios in American households led to the ascendancy of mass-market advertising, while the birth of installment credit loans allowed average Americans to purchase upwards of 80% of all high-ticket items purchased on
Yep,
credit.
that was a
practice
fucking
that would later
problem.
contribute
That was
to
a
the
major
economic
fucking
problems
problem.
pandemic by the end of the decade.
It was.
Responding to a French entrepreneur.
Does that sound fucking familiar to what we're dealing with today? How people are maxed out on all their shit. They're maxed out on credit cards and all this other shit. People putting vacations on their credit cards. I mean, Gen Z appears to be really bad at that, man. Like taking all this Instagram bullshit, trips to Dubai and all this fucking shit. And they're putting it all on their credit cards, maxing it out. And they're like, well, I don't give a shit about my elder years. I'm going to live for today. To hell with my retirement and all that. I'm just going to max everything out and just fuck it. I'll just let tomorrow worry about it.
Entrepreneur's offer
Ain't
of
good.
a $25,000 prize to the first aviator to make a nonstop flight across the Atlantic. On May 20,
Charles Lindbergh.
1927,
Oh, yeah.
25-year-old Charles Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis struggled to lift off from the muddy grass runway at Roosevelt Field in Long Island.
Uh-oh.
So overloaded with fuel that the plane barely cleared the telephone wires at the end of the runway.
Oh, shit, dude. Could you imagine?
On May 21st,
What the
halfway
fuck?
across the
He was
pond,
lucky.
Lindbergh entered a fog bank as he struggled to stay awake.
Uh-oh.
Holding his eyelids open with his fingers, he later confessed that he hallucinated about ghosts passing through his cockpit.
Whoa.
After
Oh,
24 hours
snap.
of flying, he spotted fishing boats and called down to them, "Which way to Ireland?"
What?
When he landed at Le Bourget Aerodrome
He was
in
getting
Paris,
directions
Charles
from the
Lindbergh
fucking ships
became
out on the
an
water.
international celebrity, strengthening the notion that one man with the right amount of daring and
I flew to
ingenuity
Ireland. I didn't know
could
that.
have an enormous impact on the world. President Coolidge dispatched a warship
Yeah,
to
it
bring
was
the
kind of a
hero
big deal
home,
back then.
and upon his arrival in New York City, Lucky Lindy was given a ticker tape parade before being presented with the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Oh, wow.
During the
Damn.
Roaring Twenties, overconfidence in the U.S. economy and the stock market in general saw that
Yeah, if you want to look up a real heavy mystery with regard to Charles Lindbergh, look up the kidnapping of his son when he was a baby. That was that's a wild mystery. That it's a good
Dow
that's a good
Jones
one.
Industrial Average shoot up
Very
to
unfortunate.
an all-time high
It's a damn
on
tragedy.
September 3rd, 1929, topping out at 381 points. To further set the stage for disaster, ordinary citizens with little financial acumen borrowed money from their stockbrokers by putting down as little as 10% of the share price,
Yeah,
which
that's bad.
artificially drove up stock values almost
did.
20% annually
It
from
did.
1922 until the Great
Big
Crash
house
in
cards.
1929. The perfect storm worsened in August of 1929,
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of the housing crash in a way.
just weeks before disaster,
2008.
when the Federal Reserve Bank of New York raised interest rates from 5 to 6%, which cooled investor enthusiasm and reversed the economic expansionary trends of the 1920s.
That'll do
At the
it.
same time, exposing a glaring and quite uneven distribution of wealth amongst Americans. Other contributing factors
Sounds familiar
included
today,
a
too.
massive global economic shift during
Transfer of
World
wealth,
War I,
COVID. Largest
from the
transfer
once
of wealth in
dominant
history.
financial centers of Europe to the newly minted American superpower, the later almost single-handedly financing Allied debts during the war. The coming disaster was made worse by high American trade tariffs imposed by Congress, such as the Fordney-McCumber tariff of 1922.
That's what President
creating
Trump's
an
talking about doing.
unsustainable global trade
Rolling out
imbalance
tariffs.
between Europe and the United States.
Gotta get
while
our fair
a
share.
grossly overheated agricultural sector in the U.S. led to falling food prices that left farmers unable to pay their debts. Still considered the worst economic disaster in the industrial age,
Yeah.
the great
still not
stock
good.
market crash of 1929 began on Thursday, October 24th, when skittish investors began selling off 12.9 million shares of corporate equities.
Ooh, wee.
On October 28th, known as Black Monday, the Dow plunged 13%.
We got to bring back those 1920s
followed
hats.
by an additional
Fucking
12%
dope.
drop on Black Tuesday. The crash wiped out fortunes both large and small in one disastrous collapse, which
A
soon
lot of people
rippled
leaving
out
rooftops
across the
when that
nation,
happened.
undermining
God rest their soul.
Americans' faith in their fragile banking system, which at the time was made up of thousands of small-town banks that lacked the size and reputation
Yep, they all
to convince
closed.
Americans that their money was safe.
Nope. They weren't.
Ordinary citizens rushed to withdraw their money from
Is that where
American
FDIC
banks,
came from?
soon discovering that the banks had lost it all on Wall Street stock speculations.
Damn, all that fucking snow.
As confidence in the
Snowball
American
fight!
economy continued
yeah!
to erode, by 1931, over 2,000 banks had failed. Mass corporate bankruptcies were to follow, since businessmen could no longer procure the necessary credit
Fuck,
that
look
had
at all
once
those people.
fueled their cash flow needs during the boom years of
Probably
the
a fucking
20s.
bread line. Yeah, it looks like it was
The
a bread
crash
line.
marked an abrupt end to the Roaring Twenties, sending America and the world into a worse.
Yo, I'm telling you, man, Americans don't know how good they got it today. I mean, a lot of us do. A lot of us have the common sense to know, but there are way too many out there, especially those who have graduated college over the last like 10 years or so. They don't have a fucking clue how bad shit can really get. I mean, all they have to do, like, there's countries they could look at today and see how they're dealing with shit. I mean, look at Venezuela. If you see how bad shit's gotten in Venezuela over the last 15 years or so, Venezuela at the turn of the millennium, they were the richest country in South America. Right now, they're the poorest. It's absolutely crazy. Like the average wage in Venezuela, it's like 40,000. I don't remember what their currency is called, but 40,000 Venezuelan dollars a month. That's the average wage. But the average cost for a hot dog from a street vendor is something like $26,000. It is fucking crazy how absolutely insane that it's gotten. I don't even think they can even afford bread lines. I mean, maybe they have them, maybe, but I mean, people today, they don't think that things could ever get that bad, but they have no idea, man. They have no idea how fragile our economy really is and how it's been propped up, especially with COVID and the trillions of dollars that they have printed from absolutely nothing. I mean, where do you think all this inflation came from? It came from that shit. It came from the stimulus checks and the unemployment checks and the rental moratoriums where the landlords were getting paid by the government because, you know, people who were out of work, they couldn't pay their rent, so the government paid for it. All that shit, man. I mean, our economy, the state of it right now, that's what the fuck's going on. And I don't see how it really could honestly get much better or any better for that matter. It's not better in any conceivable way right now. It's far worse. And it's made even far worse with the whole housing crisis we're dealing with right now with the cost of housing. It's like half Americans, they're loving it because they're homeowners and their houses have doubled in value. But the other half probably, well, yeah, I think at least half of Americans probably, you know, own or they're locked in their mortgage at a decent rate. But the other half, especially younger Americans, I mean, that American dream is just not there. I don't know if it's going to be there anytime soon, but that's also a massive problem that we're going to be seeing in the coming few years.
First hard time known as the Great Depression, not to be fully broken.
I just hope
until
that
the
shit doesn't
outbreak of
happen.
World War
Great
II.
Depression. All
And
right,
there
was
you
that
have
that?
The
There we
Roaring
got it.
20s.
That's it, the
Today
Roaring
in Daily
20s.
Dose. If you enjoyed
Very
this
cool.
short educational video,
I did enjoy that.
consider giving the filmmakers a YouTube super thanks from as little
I
as
enjoyed
$1,
that a lot.
so that you too can feed the filmmakers.
Yeah, give 'em a
and
super
feed the
thanks.
brain.
All right, that was cool, man. That was cool. I love the Roaring 20s, learning about the Roaring 20s. That was very enjoyable. Let's see, I can read a couple comments here. Young people drinking, doing drugs, sleeping around, disrespecting the law, and partying hard. Wait, that sounds familiar. Yeah, no shit, dude. That's what the fuck I'm saying. This shit is just, it's like, dude, you got to learn your history. Because I wouldn't go as far as to say that history repeats itself, but history rhymes. I prefer that saying over the history repeats itself because it doesn't perfectly repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. And dude, the Roaring 20s, I know we're in the 2020s, so it might seem a little too familiar because we're in the second decade of the century, but even still, man, I don't know, man, just the way that the economy's looking, the way that it's started off, it's looking ominous. And some economists and some historians and some experts, they might say that when your economy falls into dire straits, that's when it's time to go to war. And I hope that doesn't happen. I really hope not. But we've got what's called the BRICS nations, and then we've got the allied nations. So it seems like there's a group of countries around the world that are kind of stacked up against the Western powers. And it just looks really ominous, man. It just looks like, you know, shit could pop off, and I hope it doesn't. God hope it doesn't, but I don't even know, man. But anyway, here's another one. My grandma had a Model T and gave it away. Another one, prohibition and bootleg mobster money hired and cultivated the best musicians, lyricists, and singers. Nearly 100 years later, it remains the most unforgettable era of popular music. That's awesome, dude. What a comment. That was a good one. My grandparents were in the teens in this time of history. I love to see the footage of their world. My grandmother said she was a flapper. Oh, no. I mean, probably wasn't, it probably wasn't a term that people, probably said loud and proud back then. I mean, I would assume that would be something that you would be relatively ashamed of, or you would not want to be referred to as a flapper. I mean, yeah, I mean, these days, looking back in history, it's romanticized and glorified, but I'm sure in the moment they probably didn't exactly like to be called flappers, but what do I know? I think to be a flapper means you cut your hair short, bound your breast so they looked flat, and wore shorter dresses. My grandfather said he helped bootleg sugar, but by the time we were born and they were our grandparents, they seemed to be very conservative. I mean, dude, even the flappers and whatnot, by today's standards, I'm sure even they were very conservative compared to today's standards. I'm sure they probably went to church and, they did all the conservative stuff, traditionalism and whatnot. They had kids probably, family. They probably didn't leave their husbands anywhere near the rate that women are leaving their husbands today. For example, 80% of divorces that are initiated in marriages today are initiated by women. And if it's college, if you're both college educated, and if there's a divorce initiated, it would be a 90% chance that it was initiated by the wife. And that's today. I'm not talking about back then. I'm just talking about today. I love watching old movies, even though this wasn't a movie, but I get it. Now, look, if you want to look up a movie, if you're not familiar with 1920s movies, there's a movie called Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. If you want to see a romantic film that might even tear you up, believe it or not, but it's a silent film. It came out in, I want to say it was 1924, maybe 1925. That's probably the 1920s movie that I've seen probably more than any other one. Such a good movie. It's a really good movie. Definitely check it out. Look it up on IMDb. It's got like a 8 point, I don't even know what the fuck. It was like 8.4, 8.6 review or rating on IMDb. Really good movie from the 1920s. The federal government, they caused the Depression of 1929. I mean, yeah, I'm sure they played a pretty big part, but it was also the push of the lender culture, the debt culture, the buy now, pay later. Does that sound familiar? I mean, it wasn't as bad as it is now, ironically. I mean, things have gotten so bad now that you've got companies like Klarna and Afterpay where you can put a freaking Chipotle burrito bowl on fucking credit today. You can go to Taco Bell or Burger King and you could put your shit on credit now. That's how bad this consumer lender culture has been getting in recent years. I mean, no shit. Like you can, I don't know if you can actually walk into a Burger King and put a Whopper on fucking credit. I don't know if it's, you can with your credit card, but with regard to Klarna and Afterpay, I think that has to do with DoorDash and Uber Eats and all that nonsense. But yeah, I mean, things are getting a little sketchy, man. That's for sure. Every time I watch something in American history, it always goes straight to slavery. Oh no. Yeah, that's not good. I mean, I guess it depends on what you're watching. I mean, not literally everything. I mean, I don't know if they were being tongue in cheek about that, but it didn't sound like they were. Conservatism and liberalism both have good qualities and logic. Too much of anything is contrary to utopia. Yeah, there has to be a balance. There really does. There has to be a balance. And we're not going to have a healthy balance with being extremely divided like we have been over the last decade. That isn't going to help anybody. Sadly, today millionaires are a common word. Not good. Yeah, well, and damn, I wish I remembered the statistic. It's an alarming statistic, but it's something like 40%. I want to say it's a high statistic, but it was like 40 some odd percent of people who make $250,000 a year consider themselves living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, you could look that up for yourself, but whatever the statistic is, the percentage, it was way higher than I would have ever expected. But yeah, a lot of people are struggling today. It's just because there's just so much shit people are buying. People are addicted to way too much consumerism today. They got to have all the nice shiny objects. Always got to have the newest and nicest of vehicles, and goes on and on. What? This is not an appropriate video for school in a classroom setting. Why? It focuses on drinking, drugs, sleeping with others, partying. Dude, history is history, man. I mean, if you water it down with too much, like feelings based, and we want the kids to not be traumatized, they're not going to learn history accurately, man. That's how things get destructive when they start changing history, not changing it, but omitting so much of it that you're not even getting the full picture. I mean, how we're like, look, elementary school, roaring 20s, they're probably not going to give a shit. And they really shouldn't learn about it anyway because it's just not going to be interesting to them. I mean, I wouldn't be teaching the 1920s to elementary school kids because it's just not going to simply hold their interest. But when they get into maybe 8th grade or even into high school, learning about the roaring 20s, yeah, you absolutely have to talk about alcohol because of prohibition. It was one of the biggest things that happened in the 1920s. I mean, they even created 2 constitutional amendments surrounding alcohol. So, I mean, to leave that out, that's kind of fucking stupid, dude. But anyway, let's see here. These issues became the primary focus and didn't really look at other events in the 20s. Dude, yeah, because prohibition was such a minute, minuscule, infinitesimally small little issue that happened in the 20s. I mean, come on, man. I'm not saying that this didn't happen. I'm saying this is not an appropriate video to show to a class of high school junior. Like, dude, who's saying that this should be shown to a bunch of high school juniors? I didn't hear that in the video, unless I was just yapping and I didn't hear him say that. Stopped and viewed it afterwards. Want to make sure that other teachers know this. Oh, okay. So this sounds like a teacher talking. Wait a minute. Is this a reply from the channel? Yep. Sorry to hear you found it less than comprehensive and too narrowly focused on the salacious aspects of the Roaring Twenties. Thanks for the comment, as it is a worthy disclaimer. Hopefully, you'll explore more content on our channel that would be a better fit for your students. Yeah, whatever, dude. Don't listen to that shit. I hope he didn't take that to heart because I thought this was an incredible video. I thought it was really good, very accurate. I mean, it talked about the president, talked about getting out of World War One, talked about the debt culture, the stock market and prohibition. Even mentioned Al Capone and the mob. I mean, they pretty much touched on the big spots. Oh, wait a minute. Did they mention anything about the flappers? Because that wouldn't be appropriate for kids to learn either. That how women were, like sexually liberated back then and were dressing provocatively, stuff like that. I mean, if you're going to make an argument that alcohol shouldn't be talked about, you probably shouldn't be talking about promiscuous women either. I mean, shouldn't abstinence be preached in schools? I know they're not. I know like way worse things are being taught in schools, from a sexual point of view. I mean, stuff that kids shouldn't even learn about at all, especially not in school. But yeah, sleeping with others. Okay, yeah, they did mention that. All right, all right, all right, all right. Well, at least they mentioned that. But anyway, so yeah, this is on Daily Dose Documentary, and that is their channel. That's their handle. I'll put this in the description. I'll also put the link to the video in the description if you don't want to hear me, yakking my mouth off the entire time. But yeah, they got a lot of historical videos on here. So definitely a channel I'm going to be checking out again for sure. And I just subscribed to it, so I'm definitely going to be doing that. And actually, let me see if I actually have a group that I can put that in. I don't think that I have one yet. No, not yet. Hold on. History. Oh yeah, hold on. I gotta create it. Create history. So I got a new playlist I just added to my channel called History. So if you want to check out that playlist, I will be adding more to it for sure. Probably will change that to like history with a maybe spicy history or history with language because yeah, whatever. I just like to talk however I want to talk whenever I'm watching this. So you know whatever. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you have a chance, and I'll see you later.